Hey, Goon Squad, welcome back to another edition of the Football Goons podcast. In this week's episode, we'll jump on the national media bandwagon and get you our immediate reaction to this past weekend's draft and the implications going forward into the coming season and beyond. Strap in as we're going to hit you with some things we liked, some other selections that left us scratching our heads. Unfortunately, for those of you following live can peek, we're missing South this week, so his brilliance will be missing as we kick things around. Let's just assume that, as usual, he probably hated everything the Eagles did. And to be honest with everybody, I'm just impressed he didn't find the closest bridge and go ahead and jump after two of his beloved Michigan Wolverines found their way to Texas to join the Dallas Cowboys. Live on YouTube, feel free to comment as we're going, and we might feature your question or comment as we go, as long as it's related to our material. So, Rock Deal, we're going to jump in here. Let's get right into some of the moves that kind of stuck out to you, things you liked, things you didn't like that certain teams did.
I'll jump right in. I can't stand the fact that, and I know I'm going to get crap from you guys for this, I really don't like what the Bears did. I know that you guys have said repeatedly that, if you think the guy is your guy, then you go get him. I can't imagine giving up all that to take a guy when you know the 49ers weren't going to draft that guy. So, yes, you got to be nervous that somebody else might offer a trade. You gave up a lot to move up one pick. You really did. And for all the talk of we think this is our guy. You just drafted a guy number 2 overall with no plans to start him this season, which in this day and age is unprecedented. If you go in the top 10 and you're a quarterback, you start day one. It's just the way it is now. So they're just creating pressure and they've created a situation for themselves, which is almost lose-lose. And they have to really pray that Trubisky's their guy. Otherwise, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Heads will roll in Chicago.
You're actually not going to get crap from me on this one because in general, I agree with that, which we've covered in depth. I absolutely hated what the Bears did. They swapped the 49ers picks. So they got the number 2 pick for the number 3 pick, and then they gave up the number 67, number 111 pick, and next year's 3rd round pick. So with the draft capital they ended up giving to the 49ers, they ended up essentially getting a quarterback who none of us even think is really good. And they gave the 49ers Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster, and Ahkello Witherspoon for trading back one spot, for doing them a favor. And they still got the guy they wanted. Not to mention, they just gave Mike Glennon $45 million. Now, only 18.5 of that is guaranteed. $18.5 million for a struggling organization is a ton of money. And they lose next year's 3rd rounder. So it made no sense to me. I know I have said that you go get your guy at all costs. Not at this cost.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm going to kind of echo what I said last year with LA and Philadelphia, where I just don't think there's too much cost. I mean, within reason, there's just not too much cost to me to go get your guy. I'm going to sit here and tell you I don't think Mitchell Trubisky's your guy. But, we talked a lot this weekend as a group. Like, I'm not the GM. They see it. For whatever ungodly reason, they see it. I don't, so I'm going to sit here and pick on it because while I don't think you gave up too much to go up and get your guy, I just think you took the wrong guy. But that's, another story for another day. But I guess I don't really mind the capital. I mean, good for San Francisco. As much as I'm not going to crush Chicago for giving up too much, I am going to celebrate John Lynch's first move as GM.
He smashed it.
With not only getting a nice haul with an extra 2 extra 3s and a 4, but still getting Solomon Thomas, who you were going to take it to. So, good for them. I guess if you're the Bears, I just hope they're right, for their sake. Where, again, it's the same thing I said about Goff and Wentz last year and now Trubisky. If he's a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback and takes you to the playoffs and maybe even gets you a ring, 2/3 and a 4th round pick for, you got your guy. So Well, I'll sit here and totally agree. It's the wrong guy. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. The guy, honestly, that whole move, the guy I feel worse for is Mike Glennon.
Yeah,
Like
really.
he goes to Tampa as a rookie, plays pretty well on a really bad roster. So they get Jameis Winston. You're done there. And then he signs a nice lucrative deal. So good for his wallet. But these guys are competitive and want to play. And now they drafted Mitchell Trubisky. So it's like the poor guy just keeps getting haunted by number 1, number 2 overall picks, which is nuts to me.
Yeah, Mike Glennon really feels wanted at this point.
Right. He did until Thursday, I think.
Yeah.
He got all that money, and now he's like, oh,
He
I
had a
better not
solid
throw
6-week stretch there.
right. I better not throw one incompletion in the preseason.
And I think the worst part about the Bears situation, not to throw coal in the fire, but I'm reading reports today that the GM and the head coach are actually, still arguing over, what took place, this past weekend for the franchise, which means they were very safe not to say which one was in disagreement, but it seems like somebody wanted Mitchell and someone didn't want Mitchell, and somebody won out here.
If you're John Fox, why on earth do you want Mitchell Trubisky?
Right.
Well,
you're not a young coach, up and comer. You want to win now. I'm like 82 years old. I don't want a rookie quarterback. So, anyways, we could debate Chicago. Yeah. I think overwhelming feeling we're not crazy about the move, and I think the bigger story, really the biggest story, might be Rock. What you just said, they got to make sure this disconnect gets fixed between Pace and John Fox. I mean, if it's true that there was a disconnect, that just cannot happen. It doesn't work. I want to bring up Tennessee. I'm curious you guys' thoughts. They came into this draft as kind of becoming a darling, and they're the next team that's coming up, and Mariota's the man, and this and that, and they have 2 first-round picks. And it was kind of widely agreed they were going to go corner and receiver with those picks, right? So we were all kind of thinking Lattimore and Mike Williams, or Lattimore and even Corey Davis at 18. And maybe it's proof of, and we'll hit on this later, the receivers going earlier than the general public thought, but first round with Corey Davis and Adoree Jackson. Do you guys think, as outsiders, that value was worth the number 5 and 18 picks that they spent?
I'm going to say, at the risk of sounding like a Titans homer, which I seem to be coming lately, what is it? I just got to pick a new AFC South team to get on board with every year.
Apparently.
So, but at the risk of sounding like a Titans homer, I think it is worth the risk, because the receivers, we debated before whether or not you take Corey Davis at 5 and make sure that you get him if he's your guy, and then take your best available corner later, or take Lattimore and then your best available receiver later on. Well, as we see now, the best available receiver at that point, if they didn't take Davis there, probably would have been like Zay Jones. So, and not to knock on Zay Jones, but we had them slotted to get one of those big 3 receivers, and they made sure they did it with that pick. Now, the Adoree Jackson pick definitely makes me scratch my head, but this goes back to what, Miles, I've heard you say on pod before, and we've talked about it in person. It all goes back to each individual GM's big board. Just because I think Kevin King is better than Adoree Jackson, because that's how I've seen it 1,000 times. The Titans obviously like Jackson more. Maybe they plan on using him, yes, as a corner, but more in the return game, which definitely would boost his draft status. He's a fantastic returner in college, punt, kickoff, Mr. Do-It-All. So as much as we can sit here and mock, or make fun of the fact that they quote unquote reached on Adoree Jackson, if that's how they had it ordered on their board, then that's what they were going to do anyway. We could sit here all day and say, well, you passed on Kevin King and you passed on, this one or that one. Well, yes and no. Maybe they did. We don't know how they had it planned in their draft board, but I can tell you this: they didn't come into pick 18 saying, "Oh man, we forgot Kevin King was still on the board." You know what
Right.
I mean? Like that was their guy. They took them.
The reason I didn't like it is, I mean, I do think they got good picks still. I think Corey Davis is going to be outstanding for them. Adoree Jackson, I think he's going to be good. We'll see. The reason I didn't really like it is because at number 5, I still think they should have taken Marshawn Lattimore and then planned on John Ross falling to them. But I guess for them, they just valued Corey Davis over John Ross more than Adoree Jackson and Marshawn Lattimore. I guess my rankings are just significantly different than them. For me, Lattimore was just hands down the best in that category. And then I think they should have waited to see what came to them or tried trading up to still get their guy, but they weren't getting Lattimore if they passed on him there.
You know what though? But hindsight being 2020, we can see that John Ross would not have made it to 18.
But then maybe Mike Williams would have. So
if you don't start that run,
no, Mike Williams went first.
No, Williams went to the Chargers.
Corey Davis.
Williams went to the Chargers.
But the Titans
but I'm
took
saying
Corey
Williams
Davis first.
Okay, so you're
So
saying
still
but
been
you're
2 available.
maybe.
It's hard to sit here and say if they would have fallen to 18, if one of them would have been. And maybe they prioritized, listen, we got to get Mariota a surefire stud. And there's enough corners that we'll pick one up at 18, perhaps. I'm not sure. I think that's one that, like, I know this is likes and dislikes, and I'm not sure I like or dislike it until I see what Adoree Jackson becomes. I mean, if he can play, then fantastic. Because I think Davis is the stud in this draft at receiver. So the last like that I want to bring up, I really loved what Minnesota did in the second round by trading up from 48. They gave up a 4th-round pick to hop likely Philadelphia to get to 41 and grab Dalvin Cook. I thought that was a great move by the brass there to take a team that didn't have a first-round pick and still grab a player easily with first-round talent. The off-the-field stuff, who knows how serious it is, and hopefully Dalvin can get over it. But if he does, I mean, you're a team, like I said, you had no first-round pick. You weren't going to draft till 48, and you probably got a top 20 player. So I really like their aggressiveness to be willing to give up a 4th-round player in a draft where they were already kind of short on picks and go grab a dynamic playmaker to take some pressure off of Sam Bradford for this year. And then God knows what's going on going forward because they're declining Teddy Bridgewater's option this year. So I don't have any idea who their quarterback's going to be next year. What did you guys think about the Dalvin Cook move?
I think he's going to be a stud, and I think that the line is more than adequate there. So I think that he's going to be a really good playmaker. This is another situation where I feel pretty bad for Latavius to say, hey, you're apparently not our guy. So
right. That's I guess it would go either way, but it's one of those things that makes me wish the draft was before free agency because some of these veterans could find themselves better situations.
Right.
If you're Latavius Murray, you're not going to sign with Minnesota when they draft Dalvin Cook. So, I'm not sure how GMs or teams would prefer it, but for the veterans, I'm sure they really wish that it was after the draft so they really truly knew where the playing time was going to be because at the time of the signing, Latavius Murray was going to be the bell cow there.
Right.
He's probably going to lose some goal line stuff. And now, what attributes does he possibly offer you that Dalvin Cook doesn't give you? There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing there for him.
On the reverse side of that, too, is they might not get deals at all if the draft was before. You know what I mean? Latavius would still be looking for work if the draft happened first and Dalvin Cook.
He'd be an Eagle right here, right now.
Right.
I saw they are the only team whose starting running back is under 210 pounds. And they don't even know who their starting running back is, but he's under 200. That's for sure. Yeah. So, anyways, not to go too far into that, but I just like the move from Minnesota's end. I think too often GMs and front offices can see that they don't have a ton of picks in this draft, and we therefore want to get as many players as we can. And Minnesota took the opportunity to take quality over quantity there, which I always would rather see. I'm never against the trade up. You got to get yourself some studs. So
yeah, sometimes it's not about how many players, but which players are the right players for your system and which players are the right players for your team.
Right.
I'd rather have 5 starters than 10 guys who aren't going to make my team by the end of next year.
Right. So kudos to them for go ahead and taking care of that, which was great. All right. So let's get into our next topic. We're calling this thing slides and glides. because it's always fun when things rhyme. Let's be honest. So every year there's going to be some players who go a little bit earlier, a little bit later than the general public expects. Part of that being we don't really know what's going on in the league. You know, we pretend we do, and it's really just how many guys do you follow on Twitter and how right are they. But there are guys that we all think are like 40th and they go 20th or vice versa. So what do you guys – I'm going to kind of hit on a few that stuck out to me. If you guys think that they were good reaches, good fits for the team, or just plain old reaches and shouldn't have happened. So the big three receivers being what I want to talk about first. We hit on them leading up to the draft and podcast where you had Corey Davis, Mike Williams, John Ross. Being there, being first-round picks, I don't think anybody's surprised that they went in the first round. But they were all off the board by number 9. All three of these guys were top 9 picks going before any corner in the entire draft. So do you guys like the moves that Tennessee, LA, and Cincinnati made with these guys, or do you think any of these is kind of a reach or they panicked?
I think I won't blame Tennessee because they were the first ones to do it. And I don't think they reached on Corey Davis. I think they thought Corey Davis was their guy, and they knew they weren't going to get him at 18. So it was take him now or don't take him at all. They took him now. Now the other two are, I think, a chain reaction of, oh, man, like if this is our guy, once again, we have to take him now because there's going to be a run on him. And the same thing in a sense, not to change the topic, but the same thing happened with the quarterbacks. Trubisky went 2. Then we saw Kansas City trade up, and then we saw Houston jump up, and before you know it, all 3 of the quarterbacks are gone in the first 12 picks. So, I think that tends to happen. I did say a little while ago I wouldn't be surprised if some of these defenders start falling because the draft was so deep that people would have to jump up for those offensive guys. You'd have to jump up if you wanted to get one of the big 3 receivers, and we could see them go quickly. I had one mock, not my most recent one. I will say that I changed my mind a little bit, but I did have one mock earlier this year that had all 3 receivers gone by 15, and I thought that was a stretch. Well, I was wrong. They were all gone by 9. So it's definitely like it's one of those chain reaction things. But at the same time, if they think they're the guy. We talk about that all the time. It doesn't just apply to the quarterback.
Yeah, the one that was most curious to me was Mike Williams to the Chargers. I like the fit in terms of what he brings to the table, but it's so similar to Keenan Allen, assuming Keenan Allen's ever on the field. They're just these huge catch radius guys and get it done with some athleticism, but mostly just a huge radius. It kind of seemed repetitive to me. The Corey Davis one, I really liked. I think Mariota got the best receiver in the draft. It's what they needed was a feature guy where all their number 2 guys can now just kind of join in. And I like the John Ross thing to complement what they have going on with, the smooth route running of Tyler Boyd and, of course, the everything guy in A.J. Green. So I didn't hate any of the picks. I think Tennessee probably had some inside information that, hey, Williams and Ross are gone. I don't think Davis was going to be there at 18, so if you want one, you had to do it at 5. So I'm not sure I love the pick, but if he's your guy, he's your guy.
See, my whole thing with the Williams pick is not to slam on your guy, Miles, but he hasn't been on the field. So, as much as they might be similar players, well, if they're similar players and they're both healthy, great. You got 2 really good receivers. But if Keenan Allen gets hurt,
worked pretty well for Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. When they were both on the field for the Bears.
Yeah, exactly. So, as much as you say, oh, well, that doesn't always work. Well, I'd rather take my chances of it working. And then if Keenan does get hurt again for the 1 millionth time, you have Mike Williams to fall back on. Because that offense was, in the last 2 years, clicking on all cylinders until Keenan went down. And then it was very one-dimensional, and when you're one-dimensional, everything else suffers, But if both of those guys are healthy, think about what that does for opening up. I mean, we all know how you feel about Melvin Gordon. Think about what that does for opening up the running game if both of those guys are healthy, So it helps out in so many different ways. Not to mention the fact that they, address their offensive line in this draft as well. So,
Yeah, I agree. It does. It is going to open things up. If it's just Mike Williams or if it's Mike Williams and Keenan, it just absolutely wasn't their number one need. That's why I didn't like it. With Tennessee, even though what I said still applies, that I think they should have taken Lattimore and then got a receiver later. I still love what they did because they absolutely needed a number one receiver, whether it was then or later. So, Mike Williams was still my number one, but I can see why Corey Davis was their number one. It makes total sense for them. The Chargers, it just doesn't make sense. They need defense. Even without Keenan last year, they were still the number 9 offense in the league. And they gave up the 4th most points per game last season at 26.4. Now by adding a huge receiver, adding offensive line help, having Hunter Henry with a year's experience under his belt, they can most likely outscore teams that are scoring 26.4 against them. But I don't think that they can win the Super Bowl with that defense. And really, that's the end goal. So it just didn't make a ton of sense. The Bengals, I never know what they're up to. I said they should take pass rush. I still think they should have. They had a wealth of talent to choose from. Instead, they chose a speedy receiver. I still love Tyler Boyd, AJ Green, obviously. And in the second, instead of taking DeMarcus Walker or Raekwon McMillan or Zach Cunningham or Passanio, they took Joe Mixon. And I said on the previous pod that I thought they might take him, but their picks just don't make sense to me. I never know what's going on with those guys.
See, and I heard the best argument ever for the Bengals taking John Ross. Like, they were at their strongest 2 years ago when they had, Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones opposite A.J. Green, taking the pressure off. The running game was then opened up, and that was when their running game was at their best. I'm not saying that Sanu and Marvin Jones are all worldwide receivers, but when you have those guys, it opens up A.J. Green. It opens up your –
Looks like we've lost the feed here on Rocco. So I think he was going
It opens up their running game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree, but I mean, I think that they still have basically that in Tyler Boyd and Tyler Eifert, and so I don't think it was a necessity. But
the thing I didn't understand about the John Ross pick to the Bengals was he seems like way too nice of a guy for them to have drafted.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
There's a lot of class out of John Ross, and they must have uncovered something that he did like in high school and fell in love with that. So I don't know. All right. So how about the slides of some of these big defenders? I mean, in what looks like one of the best defensive drafts that we've had in a long time, we kind of covered already 6 of the first 12 picks were receivers or quarterbacks. And that caused some big name defenders that were consensus top 10 at absolute worst top 15 players kind of falling, with Marshawn Lattimore not going till 11, Malik Hooker not going till 15, Jonathan Allen at 17, and Reuben Foster at 31, where there were some questions there. But do you guys think injury or character concerns were that powerful, and that's what's caused the slides, or more a case of the teams in front kind of falling in love with other players, or just straight up needing quarterbacks that you traded up for it?
I think the combination is there, obviously, depending on the player. Foster's injury had to have come into play a lot, or more so than we thought it might have. Possibly the attitude there as well. But more so, I think that what it really boiled down to is there was like 6 really – well, actually, we'll call them with the 3 receivers, the 3 quarterbacks, and the 2 running backs. There was 8 offensive players that you needed to get, and you needed to either trade up for or take right then and there. And we've said it for months. This is such a deep draft class. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have one of the stud receivers and then the number 5 corner, who in any other draft could be the number 2 corner, or the number 1 corner but the number 7 wide receiver who's not really at even close to the same level as the big 3. So I think the defenders fell because it was such a deep class, and people said, teams said we can get that later. We can address that need with the quality of depth that is this draft class.
I'd rather have Malik Hooker. that one blew my mind. Yeah, you're not real sad. That one blew my mind, though. And I know that with him and Allen and Foster, there were some injury concerns or character stuff, but I don't know. I just felt like I'm a big Pat Mahomes fan, but you felt the need to give all that up to get Pat Mahomes or Watson, and like Hooker's there, and I know I'm Exhibit A of got to get the quarterback, but I don't know. It just felt like these defenders, man, are superstars.
If I'm Houston, I give up all that for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah,
I'm not even saying Deshaun Watson. He was the third quarterback. He was the one left. He was the next obvious guy. If it had gone in reverse and Kansas City traded up for Watson, then Houston should have traded up for Mahomes. That I'm not arguing with. I am scratching my head with the Chiefs trading up because they're not Patrick Mahomes away from winning the Super Bowl. You know what I mean?
I think they are. Alex Smith's the reason they don't win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, they very well could.
If your own fans are tweeting out, we lost this playoff game because Alex Smith can't complete a 12-yard pass after a holding penalty on a 2-pointer. The quarterback is I'm not going to crush Kansas City or Houston, I guess, for trading up because I think they're both a quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender.
Agree.
It's just a matter of I guess I'll pick more on a team like Carolina. The group here, we love McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey's a great player. I don't think that was the right pick for them there. You need to rebuild that defense into superstardom, and Marshawn Lattimore should have been the pick. And if he wasn't, Malik Hooker really should have been the pick. I don't get the McCaffrey pick to them. Jonathan Stewart's not the reason they're losing.
Yeah.
Listen, I love McCaffrey, and I think they're going to use him in some creative ways there, which is pretty great. But you need to rebuild that secondary. It didn't recover after losing Josh Norman. And we covered that in the season recap. Like, get Lattimore, get Hooker.
Right.
I think the craziest thing about that the Panthers to me is that they didn't take Lattimore. They took McCaffrey. And then they didn't even address the corner need in the second round. And they took Curtis Samuel, who by all means is a fantastic player. He's the two of them are like Swiss Army knives. But, we've talked forever about how they need to address the corner position since Norman left. And you took two do-it-all offensive players. So I agree. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But at the same time, Christian McCaffrey to the Panthers is not the reason why the rest of the defense slid. You know what I mean? Like, You're talking about one draft pick. And let's be honest, if they took Lattimore, Christian McCaffrey was probably going in the next 4 or 5 picks anyway. You know what I mean? It's not like he was going to fall all the way down to 20 because the Panthers didn't take him. So, I think the need to get the 8 real offensive players in this draft pushed everything else back. And, based on need and preference and scheme fit, we saw the Jonathan Allen slide. We saw, the Malik Hooker slide, which still to this day baffles me. I wanted Hooker all along. I got Adams. Jamal Adams is going to be my new favorite player in a year. But I would have taken Hooker at that spot and felt the same exact way. So that him falling all the way to 14 or 15, whatever it was, the Colts pick,
15.
At 15, absolutely shocks me.
All right, so on the heels of discussing McCaffrey here, I actually want to bring up running back value and just get everybody's feel on this. Fournette goes 4, McCaffrey goes 8, and that was actually kind of expected. But then you have Dalvin Cook at 41, Joe Mixon all the way to 48, and the rest of what was a pretty good running back class, 3rd round or beyond. So leading up, there was this perceived, running back renaissance and the increased value, and the running back is back. And then aside from, obviously the 2 guys going top 10 is kind of a big deal. The draft really didn't fall to following that belief. So do you guys think that running back still is a devalued position? Or do you think this year, when you look through the class, it was more a lot of specialty or situational guys, a lot of guys who can play but really just 2 or 3 studs. I mean, what was kind of your opinion on the running back situation?
I'm honestly not sure what happened. It's still kind of shocking to me. And I would say other than Miles and Frank Walker Law, one of our proud sponsors, they're probably the only 2 people that are even in my galaxy of loving running backs. And this running back class is special. And I've gone on and on about Mixon more. I've covered him on here, but I've covered him even more in depth with you guys. And, having Dalvin Cook and Leo and even Kamara and a lot of these guys are going to be pretty special. So I get the franchise quarterback argument, but this doesn't seem like the year to risk that. And other positions, Dalvin is better than number 41. Mixon is better than number 48. Other guys who were drafted where they got drafted. And another, completely off topic, I guess. Why in the world did New Orleans take Alvin Kamara? That's completely ridiculous. But in my mind, teams should try to have a great running back. But I love running backs, so I'm probably not a great barometer here.
Well, Mixon was better than. I mean, I'm gonna call it like it is.
Better than a number 2 draft pick.
Mixon was better than number 8. I think in a regular perfect world, Mixon's the second best running back in this draft. So him at 48 doesn't surprise me because that had not number 1, absolutely not number 1.
He's better.
But Mixon at 48 doesn't surprise me because that's 100% an issue of where teams felt comfortable drafting him and what teams felt comfortable drafting him. You know what I mean? So, but the rest of it kind of does surprise me. But I think what it boils down to is after the top 2, it's really you have a lot of guys who are good, but they're very different players. You know what I mean? And obviously that's kind of a cop-out statement. Obviously they're different players, but once you get past the top 2, actually we'll say top 3, because I think Cook is a special player too. But so once you get past the top 3, it's what guy fits our needs best. And if you feel like you're reaching at that point, I heard a great argument today about Denver looking at Jamal Charles now after the draft. Not that they think that Jamal Charles is a better option than what they could have gotten, but it still comes down to big boards for these teams. Here's the guys that we think are on our big board. When it's our turn to pick in round 2, if we think it's too much of a reach to grab our running back, we go with our big board. And then we readjust in round 4. And if it's too much of a reach, to grab our next running back and our other ones are gone now, then we readjust. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to be the team that, drafts your running back in the 3rd round when he really had a 4th or 5th round grade because, you wanted to make sure you got that guy. Well, yes and no. Like we talk about that all the time, but it's within reason. You're not going to jump up 2 or 3 rounds early on a back, So and at that point, it's really a lot of positional schemes and fits and different things like that. If you're a power running game, you're not going to take an undersized, Pumphrey, and at the same time, if you're looking for a speed back, you're not going to take, Deontay Foreman, who's a little bit bulkier and a little bit more of a power back, so I just think at that point we see slides at the running back position because of team fits. Outside of the top 3 guys who are do-it-all guys, the other guys could be feature backs, but more than likely are going to be role sharing guys.
So based on need, do you think that Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis and the Saints organization?
No. We're going to take.
Do you think
we're going to take the Saints and throw them right out because they don't make any sense? Because they already had a top 12 back in the league in Mark Ingram, and then decided they needed AP, and then decided they needed Alvin Kamara. Like you can't even go by that because it doesn't make they don't make any sense.
But do you
outside of making sure that Drew Brees suits up for them on Sundays, they haven't done anything right.
I want to talk too. Do you think that those guys thought that Alvin Kamara could play safety or corner or linebacker or defensive end or offensive line? Any of those positions? Do you think that they thought Alvin Kamara could play those?
Probably not.
I like the Kamara pick.
Stop it. I'm
Hold on. Let me
ejecting you from this call.
let me clarify.
Wait, do you know that the Saints picked him?
Yes. Let me clarify that I agree that no, he's not the positional need. Obviously, defense. We've talked about, but he does offer them something at the running back position they don't have.
I didn't need. They don't even freaking run the ball. Why do they need three good running backs?
Don't need it for 2017. But I think he's an excellent pick for the franchise itself. Peterson's not going to be around that much longer. We all know Mark Ingram is – they're going to let him go as soon as I have no idea why they re-signed him. Beside the point. I think Kamara offers them more what they want out of a running back. I didn't love, passing up on some defenders for him, but I like the pick. So, jump on me if you want. I don't care.
You're silly.
There you go. That's probably the nicest way you could have put it, which I appreciate. All right. So our final hit here on picks alone, I kind of want to go maybe one per goon here. I absolutely love a team player fit that happened. And let's avoid the obvious. The Browns had the top pick. Myles Garrett was the best player. Bingo. But, do you have anybody that went, even in the later rounds, if you want to dip into that just a perfect situation of where the position was kind of a need, the value of the pick was there, the scheme fits the player's skill set. Anybody want to jump in on a guy they love the situation for both player and team?
Yeah, I'll go first. I love O.J. Howard to the Bucks. I said a few weeks ago I thought they were going to target him, and they did. They have a wealth of talent on offense now. Is it too much that he potentially doesn't get as involved as he could on another team? Sure, but I don't think that happens. They have enough balls to go around there. I like Jameis to throw the ball a ton this year. His first season, he threw 33.4 passes per game. Last season, he threw 35.4 passes per game. So he's gone up 2. And I like him to jump up in the 40 pass per game mark this year. That puts him up in the category with Breeze and Rodgers. And then also when I looked into this stat, Palmer, Flacco, and Bortles from last season. Why in the world are Palmer, Flacco, and Bortles throwing the ball that much, which is weird, but that doesn't matter. OJ is going to get his this year. He might take a little bit to get up to full speed of the NFL game and be a huge part of the offense, but he's going to be a difference maker this year, just a few weeks in max, and going forward from here on out, especially with that tandem of tight ends they have now. I don't think Cameron Brate is the number 1 tight end, but having both of them together is going to be ridiculous, awesome, along with that receiving core. And if they decide to stick with Doug Martin when he comes back, we often forget how good of a receiver he is when he's used that way. So, man, Jameis has we're going to talk about fantasy in a little bit. Get any of those guys, any of the Bucks, get them this year.
Deal, by the way, those teams are throwing so much because they're down by 20 points all the time.
I'm not cheering for them. I just want their fantasy points.
Because they're throwing picks, though. So
yeah.
Stop throwing picks, Blake.
One pick that I loved, and I know we're going to have at least one, Goon Squad listener who's going to love this, but one pick that I absolutely loved was Takk McKinley to the Falcons. We saw on draft night. Find me later. We saw on draft night that guy's passion, which was a little over the top, maybe for the stage of the NFL draft. But if that's how he is, then how do you think he's going to be when he puts on a helmet? Yeah. You're going to line this guy up opposite Vic Beasley. There's some real veteran defenders there that can teach him how to hone his skills, and you are going to have a nasty, nasty pass rush coming out of Atlanta, for the next 5 to 7 years, as long as both those guys are still on the team. Deion Jones, fantastic linebacker. That whole, back 4 of the front 7, we'll call it, is just so young. They're youngry. And
they just got more younger.
I love the pick, mainly from an attitude standpoint, because Takk, without being as arrogant as some of the Seattle guys we've seen, Takk has that attitude that I think Dan Quinn is looking for, from some of those Seattle guys from his days there. And I think Tack's going to bring that hungry, passionate attitude to the Falcons defense.
He is younger.
He is younger.
All right. Yeah, we didn't discuss ahead of time. I had OJ Howard at Tampa as well. That was beautiful for them. I mean, with the speed they added on the outside, the middle of that field is going to be wide open. We're going to see what Alabama had all along and just didn't use. So, not going to get too far into it. I did like a lot of them. I love T.J. Watt's fit in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
That's perfect. Bud Dupree came into his own. T.J. Watt coming off of the other edge is kind of what you just talked about Atlanta with Tack coming on opposite Vic Beasley.
Especially if Ryan Shazier is healthy.
Pittsburgh's going to be scary again on defense. So a good pick there. I actually think there are a lot of teams that here early on and filled some needs with some players that really fit the system. So good job for them. So
let's dive a little deeper. Deal. How do you feel about Marlon Mack to the Colts?
Return of the Mac, son. Return of the Mac.
He's actually going to be a solid fantasy fit, I think, after a few weeks. He just fits what Indy is on offense, which is fast, spread him out, get him in space.
Can we talk about how much I want to hug Chris Ballard?
How many picks did the Colts have? Like 7?
How many picks did they have?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
all of them were better than Griggs' entire tenure there.
It was like Luck, Hilton, all this year's drafts, and then the other picks that Grigson made.
Yeah,
so good job.
And there was even a gap between there too, between what Chris Ballard.
Oh yeah, it's not close.
Yeah.
So all right, our last little segment tonight, we're calling this "Fantasize with Me." We're going to finally get into the passion of this group, which is some fantasy football for the upcoming season. We hit on this a bit recently. Every once in a while, throwing little bits in there, but we're going to get a little more in depth now that we see what these teams are and where these prospects fell. So who has a fantasy rookie out there you're going to be heavily targeting due to team fit and more importantly, a lot of times with rookies, just available touch share? Who's going to get the ball?
So right off the bat, I think it's silly not to mention Dalvin Cook. Miles, you already touched on this. Honestly, from a fit purpose and from what they have, I actually think Dalvin's in the best situation between him, McCaffrey, and Fournette. Obviously, I think Fournette and McCaffrey, I've said it along. I know, Miles, you disagree here. I think Fournette and McCaffrey are better than Cook, but Cook absolutely landed in the right spot here because they want to run the ball. That's what they do. They run the ball. And his backup is Latavius Murray, who's a nice piece. With no real wide receivers, nothing really to worry about in the passing game, Cook's going to get the ball a lot. McCaffrey is going to have to share the ball, even though they might try find fancy ways to get it to him. Cam runs the ball. Jonathan Stewart's still on the team. You got Kelvin Benjamin. You got Greg Olsen. You got guys that they're going to use. They also drafted Curtis Samuel in the second. They're going to try and get him involved. So there's a lot of guys in the Panthers offense that are going to share the ball. Same with Fournette. You have Allen Robinson. You have Marquise Lee. You have Allen Hurns. And Yeldon, Ivory, and now Fournette. Fournette's hands down going to win that job. That's not even the question. But it's still guys that are going to touch the ball. Whereas Dalvin Cook really winds up in a great situation. I think that's hands down the best running back situation for all the rookies.
Yeah, I already covered that. I already covered OJ in the last segment, who I 100% this little foresight here for you. I 100% believe he's going to be a starter even in 8-team leagues. So he's going to be a top 8 scorer. I think a top 6 scorer, but I don't like to talk too much about tight end because it's just not that great. It's like, let's talk about kickers and defenses and then tight ends and then no thanks. So I love Christian this season. I love Corey Davis. I love Leo, but I love Joe Mixon probably more than anybody other than his mother, and that one's close. So I might love him as much as his mother. I think that we've covered that, and he's absolutely going to take the job in Cincinnati. Listen, everybody knows I love Jeremy Hill, but they're going to have to figure out a way to part ways with one of those guys or the whole tandem. It doesn't matter which or both they take. they take out of the mix, because Mixon can do everything that both of those guys can do better. So there's no reason he's not on the field 3 downs, and then there's really no reason they shouldn't go for it on 4th down having Joe Mixon. So I think he is my number one target as far as rookies go.
I'm gonna hit you guys with a little bit more of a sleeper, and before
Don't
I
take
get
Kamara.
into,
Don't take Kamara.
I won't. Before we get too far into that, I will say it. We're south here tonight. We all know from discussions with him, his guy's Leonard Fournette. He's going to take Fournette early and often. There's a reason that Jacksonville took him 4th, and it's pretty much because they realized what they had. And if they want Blake to be the quarterback that they're hoping he can be, they need to lean on that running game. But for me, it's still a running back. It's a later round running back. I love Jamal Williams going to the Packers. Team with virtually no running back at this point. Christian Michael's gone. Ty Montgomery, stop it. He's just not a running back. He's a receptions out of the backfield guy. He ran the ball okay at times. But Jamal Williams gives them something they've lacked, which is a decisive downhill guy that's just going to get the job done between the tackles. And as much as we think about Aaron Rodgers as chucking around and the Packers throw it like crazy, I think they want to run the ball. They just haven't been able to. They haven't had a guy. Eddie Lacy couldn't be counted on. And Jamal Williams kind of gives you that power that Eddie Lacy had, but with a little svelter build, if I can hit you there. All right, this guy's chiseled. Okay,
great vocabulary usage.
Thanks, man. Svelte. I liked it. So BYU runs hard. Certainly not going to make very many people miss. This isn't Shady McCoy. Let's not get it twisted. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you this guy's going to end up on championship rosters as a starting back. But I will say by midseason, going through buys, you're going to be able to do a lot worse than Jamal Williams, because I think he's going to take over that backfield kind of by midseason. Sort of, and I don't want to throw this out there as a comparison directly, but sort of the way we saw Jordan Howard take it over.
That's exactly.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure he's going to get the results that Howard got. Nobody in the world is predicting Jamal Williams to finish second in the league in rushing, but you're going to get that touch share through week 8, week 9 as you're trying to make a push through bye weeks where you can throw him in there and get 12, 13 points and be okay with that until your star comes back from his bye. So kind of keep that in your back pocket here for the 12th, 13th round. I think Jamal Williams is going to make some people pretty happy.
I think, just not to belabor the point, but I think 2 names I really want to throw at people right now, both I think tremendous draft picks from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Deal, you're going to love this. But I would keep my eye on James Conner just because you never know when Lev is one play away from going down. And every play he's one play away. So I would definitely keep my eye on that situation. Obviously, he's not a guy that you're going to roster right away, but have your finger on the clicker just in case, all of a sudden you see Lev go down awkwardly. But the guy I really want to talk about, and I think is going to be a really, really, really great complementary receiver in Pittsburgh, is Juju Smith. This guy is better than anything that they threw out with AB last year. And we were constantly talking about, Eli Rogers, and even though Martavius Bryant looks like he's going to be back this year, after a whole year off and really only being their deep threat, what can you really expect from him? But Juju is a complete receiver. I talked about him when we were going over the wide receiver positions in the draft, and I know, Miles, this is a guy that you really love. Watch him play football in college and now put Antonio Brown on the opposite side of him where he
looks like we
gets the ball at its high point. He jumps up and gets the ball at his high points. He's just a fantastic receiver, and now gets to play next to one A, B, or C, however you look at it in the NFL. This is a guy that should absolutely, by midseason, be in deep leagues like a wide receiver 3.
I can't wait to get more into fantasy discussion so I can tear you apart.
Okay. I'm guessing Miles doesn't like Juju.
I like Juju, but you just called him a wide receiver 3, and I don't think you were talking about just on the Steelers. It's coming, folks, as soon as next week. So That's going to do it here for this edition of the Football Goons podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and you didn't miss South too much. Again, we're asking everybody to get active for us here on social media. Can't take over the world without your help. So what did you take away from the draft for your team? Did you love it? Did they crush it, or did they crush your dreams? This is going to be another sad sack year for you. What needs still exist on your team that clearly won't be addressed till next offseason? We want to know. So make sure you hit us up on any of our platforms. We'll be keeping an eye out. We're pretty quick to answer your questions and comments. Keep tuning in here as we move forward with the offseason. Very shortly here, we're going to be releasing our first composite fantasy football rankings on the site for you to get your league championship prep started. I believe they're set to release on Monday, so we'll be ready to go with those. We're also headed straight for the NFL dead time, so we're going to have some fun off-season topic podcast ready to go like last May and June before we really get into previewing the 2017 season over the summer. You can find us as always on footballgoons.com, facebook.com/footballgoons, and on the Twitter @footballgoons. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube to catch notifications of when we're going live. Thanks again for the listen, and as always, we'll catch you next time.